mother-in-law told my husband I was infertile, smirking across the table at my mother-in-law's birthday dinner. When I asked what she meant, she smiled and said, "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Maybe it's because you can't." I just stared at her. That was 8 months ago. Yesterday, she locked herself in the bathroom and cried quietly. I almost missed it. Maya Al kept humiliating me and spreading lies that I was infertile to sabotage my marriage. So I exposed her year-long affair with her ex in front of her fiancé. From the moment I married my husband, his sister, Lena, made it her life's mission to make me feel like an outsider. She's the type of person who smiles to your face but stabs you in the back before you can blink. At family dinners, she would make jokes about me being city spoiled because I grew up in a different area. She'd say things like, "I guess some women just marry for comfort, not love," while staring at me. If I confronted her, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Oh, relax, you're too sensitive, and it's just banter." First, I tried to get along with her for the sake of family peace. I'd compliment her, help her with her errands, even baked her a cake for her birthday once. Her response: she told everyone I had probably just bought it from the store and claimed I made it. My husband would brush it off, telling me not to take her seriously because that's just how she is. Things got worse after my husband and I started trying for a baby. We'd only been trying for a few months, but Lee will drop comments like, "Some women just aren't meant to be mothers," or, "You know, my friend couldn't get pregnant because she waited too long. Maybe you should have started sooner." She'd say these things in front of other people, making it awkward and humiliating. The breaking point came at my mother-in-law's birthday dinner. In the middle of the meal, Lee smirked and said loudly, "It must be so hard for you knowing you can't give my brother kids." Everyone at the table froze. My husband looked shocked, and I just sat there stunned. I asked her what she meant, and she said, "Oh, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You've been trying for a while, right? If it hasn't happened yet, maybe it's because you can't." Later that night, my husband confronted me privately, asking if there was something I wasn't telling him. I was furious. I told him we'd only been trying a short time, and there was no reason to assume anything was wrong. That's when he told me Lee had been telling him in private that I was infertile. She claimed she knew for a fact because a mutual friend had told her I had a health condition that made pregnancy impossible. This was a complete lie. I realized Lee was trying to plant seeds of doubt in my husband's mind about me. This wasn't just her being rude. It was deliberate sabotage. Here's the thing. I've kept my mouth shut for years about Lena's own dirty little secrets. I knew for a fact she'd been sleeping with her ex-boyfriend on and off for the past year, while still being in a committed relationship with her current fiancé, Matt. I had proof too, screenshots, texts, even a photo from a friend who had spotted them together. I never said a word because I didn't want to cause drama, but after what she did to me, that changed. The very next weekend, we had another family gathering, a barbecue at my in-laws' house. Leo was there, smiling smugly at me like she'd won some invisible war. At one point, she made another comment about some people not being able to handle motherhood. That was it for me. In front of everyone, I said, "Funny coming from you, Lena, considering you spend so much time in your ex's bed while Matt thinks you're faithful." The silence was deafening. Lena's face went pale, and she stammered something about me making things up. I calmly pulled out my phone and showed my husband, my in-laws, and even met the screenshots and messages. It was undeniable. Lee exploded, screaming at me for ruining her life. She tried to twist it by saying I was just jealous of her relationship, and that I had been waiting for a chance to take her down. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "No, Lena, I kept quiet for years, but you tried to destroy my marriage with lies. I just told the truth." Matt left immediately, telling her not to contact him. My in-laws were in shock. My mother-in-law tried to scold me for airing private matters in public, but I reminded her that Lee had been publicly humiliating me for months and spreading lies about my health. My husband stood by me, saying he finally saw Lee for who she really was. Lee has since tried to reach out, alternating between sending me angry texts, calling me a homewrecker, and pathetic attempts at guilt-tripping me like, "You didn't have to go that far, we're family." She's also claimed I overreacted, and that she was just joking about the infertility comments. That's her favorite defense, pretending every cruel thing she says is just a joke, and I'm too sensitive to get it. It's been weeks since the barbecue, and I thought Lee had finally accepted defeat, until my husband got an anonymous email with proof I'd been unfaithful. That evening, David walked into our bedroom, holding his laptop with this weird look on his face, and set it down on the bed between us. The screen showed an email with photos of me supposedly meeting some guy named Ryan at different coffee shops and restaurants over the past month. I grabbed the laptop and started scrolling through the message, and right away I could tell it was Lena's writing style, because she always uses these specific phrases like, "just thought you should know," and "hate to be the bearer of bad news," which were all over this email. The metadata on the photos showed they were created just 3 hours after the barbecue incident, which made it pretty obvious who was behind this. David sat down next to me and said he didn't believe any of it, but needed to understand why someone would go through all this trouble to fake evidence against me. I immediately called Nina and put her on speaker, while David watched me pace around the room, pulling at my hair and trying not to cry. Nina works in HR and does investigations all the time, so she knew exactly what to look for in the email headers and attachments. She walked us through checking the photo properties, and we could see they were badly photoshopped using my LinkedIn profile picture, pasted onto some random woman's body in these restaurant photos. The IP address from the email account traced back to the area near Columbus General Hospital, where Lee works as a nurse, which pretty much confirmed what we already knew. After we hung up with Nina, David went to his home office, and I could hear him moving around in there for about an hour before everything went quiet. I found him sitting at his desk, staring at our wedding photos and family pictures from over the years with this lost expression on his face. He started pointing at different photos and telling me about moments he'd forgotten, like when Leigh got jealous at our engagement party and made that scene about not being included in the planning, or when she kept insisting he deserved someone from their neighborhood, not some outsider like me. The pattern was right there in every photo, where she stood slightly apart from us, or had that big smile she does when she's angry. His phone rang, and it was Anna practically screaming that we needed to come over right now because Leigh had shown up at their house crying and claiming I threatened her life. We drove over in complete silence, and when we walked in, Leigh was on the couch with mascara perfectly smeared down her face in these artistic streaks, while Anna rubbed her back. Leah jumped up when she saw me and started yelling about how I'd been jealous of her since day one and had planned everything to destroy her happiness because I couldn't stand that she had a better relationship than mine. Anna was eating it up and kept shooting me these disappointed looks while Leah went on about how I'd stalked her and Jake and set them up to get caught. Robert pulled David aside into the kitchen, and I could see them through the doorway having this intense conversation, while Robert showed him something on his phone. Later, David told me Robert had gotten a text from Matt asking if the family knew about Lena's affair before the barbecue happened, which made Robert admit he'd seen her car at the Days End off Route 23 multiple times when she was supposed to be working 12-hour shifts. Robert said he'd kept quiet because he didn't want to cause drama, but now he was questioning if that was the right choice since it let things get this far. Back in the living room, Leah suddenly stood up and announced she was pregnant with Matt's baby while putting her hand on her stomach in this really dramatic way. Anna gasped and immediately switched into protective grandmother mode, asking Leah how far along she was and if she'd seen a doctor yet. I remembered seeing Leah drinking wine at her friend's birthday party just last week and posting photos with cocktails on her Instagram story 3 days ago. When I pointed this out, Leah claimed she just found out today and pulled a pregnancy test out of her purse to wave around as proof. My phone buzzed and it was a text from Nina with a screenshot from Jake's Instagram story from 3 hours earlier showing him at CVS buying pregnancy tests with a caption, "Doing a favor for a friend with that winking emoji he always uses." I showed David the screenshot without saying anything and watched his face change as he put the pieces together about whose baby this might actually be if there even was a baby at all. I excused myself to the bathroom where I leaned against the sink, taking deep breaths and trying not to throw up from the stress of everything. I pulled out my phone and texted Matt asking if he'd be willing to meet with me to talk about what was really going on with Lena. I stared at myself in the mirror seeing how tired and worn down I looked from all this drama that never seemed to end. My phone lit up with Matt's response saying he could meet tomorrow morning at 10 at the coffee shop on High Street near his apartment. That night I couldn't sleep and went downstairs around 3 in the morning to find David already in the kitchen making tea with his back to me. There's something odd about how quickly Leah shifted from denying everything to suddenly claiming she's pregnant with Matt's baby right when she was cornered. I wonder if she keeps that pregnancy test in her purse for emergencies, or if Jake really did buy it for her just hours before this whole scene played out. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table not saying anything for the longest time, just holding our mugs and staring at nothing. He finally told me he was sorry for not defending me more over the years and admitted he always knew Leah was difficult, but took the easy path to avoid fights. He reached across the table and took my hand, and we both knew without saying it that our marriage was being tested in ways we never expected. The next morning I got to the coffee shop early, and Matt was already there in corner boot looking like he hadn't slept in days with dark circles under his eyes. He started talking before I even sat down, telling me how Leah had been acting weird for months with secret phone calls and leaving work early and suddenly losing interest in their wedding plans. He pulled out his phone and showed me emails from a private investigator he'd hired 2 months ago but called off after Leah cried and promised to be honest with him. The investigator's report had photos of Leah meeting Jake at that same days in Robert mentioned and records of her calling in sick to work on days when Jake was off from his job. Matt's hands shook as he slid a thick folder across the coffee shop table toward me. Inside were dozens of photos from the private investigator showing Leah entering Jake's apartment at all hours. There she was kissing him in his car outside a grocery store. Another showed her leaving his place at dawn wearing the same clothes from the night before. The dates went back over a year, and one photo made my stomach turn. It was from the night of me and David's anniversary dinner when Leah had told everyone she was working a double shift at the hospital. Instead, she was wrapped around Jake in the parking lot of his apartment complex. I asked Matt why he never said anything before now. He stared at his coffee and admitted he'd been in denial for months. Every time he questioned her, she'd twist things around and make him feel crazy. She'd say he was being paranoid and controlling. Jake was just a friend helping her with workout routines for their wedding. Looking back, Matt realized how badly she played him. My phone buzzed with a text from David saying Leah had convinced Anna to call an emergency family meeting that evening to address my supposed vendetta against her. I showed Matt the message, and he immediately offered to come with all his evidence. Part of me hesitated knowing this would blow up everything, but Matt insisted we had to stop her. After Matt left, I sat in my car in the parking lot and called Nina to update her on everything. She suggested I start documenting every single thing Leah had done with dates and details to build a timeline. While we were talking, another email popped up on my phone from an anonymous address. This one said if I didn't back off, they'd send those fake photos of me cheating to my employer and get me fired. 2 hours later, I forwarded the threatening email to Nina, who immediately recognized it as criminal harassment. She wanted me to go to the police right away, but I wasn't ready to turn this into a legal thing yet. Nina reminded me that Leah worked as a nurse with access to patient information and medications. Someone this vindictive shouldn't be in that position of trust. My phone rang, and it was David sounding angrier than I'd ever heard him. Leah had just shown up up at his office with Anna and made a huge scene in front of all his co-workers. She was crying and carrying on about how I was mentally unstable and needed professional help. His boss had to step in when Leah started wailing in the lobby about our family being torn apart. David told them both to leave immediately, and now HR was asking him questions about the whole mess. I drove home feeling exhausted and found my front door slightly open even though I knew I'd locked it that morning. Nothing looked disturbed as I walked through each room, but something felt wrong. In the bathroom, I found a negative pregnancy test sitting on my counter with a note that said, "Since you're so interested in who's pregnant." My hands were shaking as I realized Leah still had the spare key we'd given her years ago for emergencies. David got home and found me in the garage getting tools to change all the locks myself. He grabbed a screwdriver and started helping without saying a word. We worked together taking out each lock and putting in new ones while the weight of everything hung between us. David mentioned he'd filed a report with HR about the office incident, and security had the whole thing on camera showing Lena's performance. That evening we drove to Anne and Robert's house for the family meeting Leah had demanded. She'd actually prepared a PowerPoint presentation about my supposed pattern of jealous behavior toward her. Before she could even start, Matt walked through the door carrying his laptop and announced he had something everyone needed to see first. Leah went white as a sheet and started stammering that he had no right to be there since they weren't together anymore. Matt ignored her and connected his laptop to the TV while Leah scrambled to block the screen. The first photo appeared showing Leah and Jake kissing in a restaurant while she was supposedly at a work conference. Anne gasped and covered her mouth while Robert's face got harder with each new image. Leah tried to grab the laptop claiming, but you could clearly see Jake's distinctive dragon tattoo on his arm in multiple shots. When she couldn't deny it anymore, she spun around and pointed at me saying I'd driven her to seek comfort elsewhere because of my constant attacks on her. The front door suddenly opened and Jake walked in looking confused, holding a plastic bag from the drugstore. He looked right at Leah and asked why she needed him to bring another pregnancy test when she'd already taken 3 this week. The whole room went dead silent as everyone turned to stare at Leah, whose face went white. Anne stood up from the couch and demanded to know if Leah was pregnant while Robert grabbed the laptop to pause the video. Leah started backing away from everyone and her hands were shaking as she tried to explain, but Jake kept talking, saying she texted him it was an emergency. Matt's face changed from anger to something darker as he processed what Jake just said about multiple tests. Leah finally broke down crying and admitted she wasn't actually pregnant, but thought if she claimed to be, then Matt would take her back. She said she figured the family would support her over me if there was a baby involved and it would fix everything. Jake dropped the bag and started backing toward the door, saying she told him the tests were for a friend at work. Robert moved to block the doorway and said nobody was leaving until everyone heard the whole truth about what had been going on. I stood there watching Lena's entire world fall apart and felt weirdly numb about it all. David's hand found mine and squeezed it gently, which made me realize this was the first time he'd shown me support in front of his family. Anne was crying into her hands while Robert kept demanding answers and Matt pulled out his phone to record everything. Jake looked trapped by the door and started explaining that Leah told him she and Matt were in an open relationship. He pulled out his phone and showed everyone text messages where Leah claimed Matt was seeing other women too. She told Jake their engagement was just for show to make her traditional parents happy and they both had permission to date others. Matt laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound and said he'd been planning their wedding while she was telling these lies to everyone. Leah tried to grab Jake's phone, but he held it away from her and kept scrolling through their messages. The texts showed months of lies about Matt supposedly cheating and Leah claiming she was stuck in a loveless relationship. Anna finally stopped crying and told Leah to get out and not come back until she could be honest. We left shortly after that and drove home in silence, both too tired to process everything that had just happened. When we pulled into our driveway, I noticed our mailbox was stuffed full of papers that weren't there when we left. David grabbed them and found printed copies of those fake photos of me with some guy named Brian. There was also a long rambling letter from Leah about how I destroyed her family and ruined her life. Our elderly neighbor Mrs. Peterson came out and mentioned she'd seen Leah at our mailbox around dinner time taking pictures of our house. David carefully saved everything in a folder, saying we'd need it as evidence if things got worse. I felt a chill run through me realizing Leah knew our daily routines and when we weren't home. The next morning, Nina showed up early with coffee and a yellow legal pad covered in notes about harassment laws. She'd spent the whole night researching restraining order requirements in Ohio and criminal harassment statutes. She explained that Leah entering our home, the workplace harassment, and the threatening emails all counted as criminal harassment. I wasn't sure about getting the police involved, but Nina pointed out that Lena's behavior was getting worse, not better. She showed me articles about stalking cases that started just like this and escalated to violence. David's phone rang while we were talking and it was his HR department requiring him to come in for a mandatory meeting. Someone had sent them the fake photos of me with Brian along with an anonymous complaint about inappropriate conduct. David realized Leah was trying to destroy both our careers now and immediately called his company's legal department. They told him to bring all the evidence we had and document everything that had happened so far. I went to work but couldn't focus on anything and kept checking my phone every few minutes for new threats. My colleague Isabella asked if I was okay because I've been jumpy and distracted for days now. Lena's master plan just fell apart faster than a house of cards in a windstorm. Fake pregnancy tests, secret boyfriend deliveries, and PowerPoint presentations about jealousy while actively committing crimes. I told my supervisor the basic situation without too many details and she suggested I take some personal days. She documented our conversation in case I needed FMLA protection later if things continued to escalate. That afternoon, Matt called me with disturbing news about Lena's behavior at the hospital where she worked. 3 of her nursing colleagues had contacted him worried about her recent performance and mental state. She'd been making medication errors, showing up late, and was found crying in the supply closet multiple times. One colleague mentioned Leah had been accessing patient records she didn't need for her regular duties. Matt said they were worried she might be looking up information on people for personal reasons, which made them uncomfortable. Nina called me later with even worse news from her contact in the hospital's administration department. Her friend had checked the system logs and found Leah had been repeatedly accessing the employee database. She was specifically searching for anyone named Brian who might work near my office building downtown. Nina's contact said this was a serious HIPAA violation if she was using hospital resources for personal vendettas. David and I decided we couldn't wait any longer and drove straight to the police station that afternoon with all the evidence Nina had helped us gather. The building felt cold and official as we walked through the metal detectors and asked the desk officer where to file a harassment report. She pointed us down a long hallway to a small room where Detective Rodriguez was waiting with a notepad and a tired expression on her face. I spread out all our papers on the table, the fake photos, the screenshots of Leah accessing the hospital database, the anonymous email, everything we had collected over the past few weeks. The detective's eyes got wider as she looked through each piece, stopping to take photos of certain documents with her phone. She told us this wasn't just harassment anymore, but potentially multiple felonies including breaking and entering, identity theft, and serious HIPAA violations that could mean jail time. She assigned us a case number and said we needed to file for a restraining order immediately while they built the criminal case against Lena. The next morning, Robert showed up at our door alone, carrying a tray of coffee and looking older than I'd ever seen him. He sat on our couch and apologized for not believing us sooner, then dropped a bomb that Leah had done this before in college. She'd stalked her ex-boyfriend and his new girlfriend so badly that the school gave her academic probation and made the family pay for therapy. Robert thought the therapy had fixed things, but now he realized Leah had just gotten better at hiding her problems. He wrote down the name of her old therapist and said he'd testify in court if we needed him too, which meant a lot coming from David's own father. 3 days later, I walked into my office to find my desk covered in sticky notes and cards from my coworkers saying things like, "Thinking of you and stay strong." My boss pulled me into her office and explained that word had gotten out about my family's situation and the company was taking it seriously by adding extra security to our floor. Part of me felt grateful for the support, but another part felt exposed, like my dirty laundry was hanging out for everyone to see and judge. I was filing paperwork at my desk the next afternoon when Anna burst through the office doors, her face red and tears streaming down her cheeks. She rushed over to my desk and started begging me not to press charges, saying Leah was getting help and that criminal charges would destroy her nursing career forever. When I pointed out that Lena's lies could have destroyed my marriage and my reputation, Anna's face twisted and she snapped that I had started everything by humiliating Leah at the barbecue. My coworkers were staring as security escorted Anna out, while she kept screaming that I was ruining her daughter's life over nothing. That evening, Leah called with more evidence. She tracked down the Brian from the fake photos and found out he was just a stock photo model from some corporate website. She'd found the same guy's face on dozens of other fake profiles online, which proved Leah had deliberately searched for and created this whole fake identity to frame me. Nina sent everything to Detective Rodriguez, who said this showed clear premeditation and would strengthen the case significantly. David called me from work the next day, his voice shaking as he told me someone had flashed all 4 tires on his car in the parking garage. There was a note under the windshield that said, "Drop the charges or it gets worse," in block letters that looked like someone trying to disguise their handwriting. The security footage showed a person in a dark hoodie, but the build looked more like Jake's muscular frame than Lena's smaller one. Detective Rodriguez added vandalism and threats to the growing list of charges and said she was expediting our restraining order hearing because things were escalating too fast. The next morning, Matt forwarded us an email from the hospital's HR director saying they were investigating Leah for professional misconduct after getting multiple complaints about her behavior. She'd been put on administrative leave while they reviewed everything, which meant she was home all day with nothing to do but stew in her anger. Our lawyer said this was perfect evidence of a pattern of behavior that went beyond just family drama into her professional life too. I thought I was handling everything okay, until I went grocery shopping and saw a woman with dark hair like Lena's reaching for cereal to aisles over. My chest got tight and I couldn't breathe. My hands shaking so bad I dropped my basket and oranges rolled everywhere. David found me sitting on the floor by the frozen foods, gasping for air while other shoppers stared at me like I was crazy. He helped me to the car and held my hand while I admitted that I kept looking over my shoulder everywhere I went, scared of what Leah might do next. Nina set up an appointment for us with a therapist who specialized in harassment victims, a calm woman who explained that Leah was showing signs of something called narcissistic injury response. She couldn't handle being exposed at the barbecue and would keep escalating until someone forced her to stop, which made me feel both validated and terrified at the same time. 2 days later, we got a call from Detective Rodriguez with shocking news that Jake had been arrested at his gym after someone found cocaine in his locker. Jake swore someone planted it there and immediately pointed the finger at Lena, telling the cops she had access to all kinds of drugs through the hospital. He admitted to their affair and said she'd been acting unstable lately, offering to tell them everything if they'd go easier on him with the drug charges. The next morning, Jake's lawyer called us asking if we could meet him at his office downtown because Jake had something important to share about Lena. We drove there right away and the lawyer a tired-looking guy in his 50s, laid out Jake's offer while Jake's out there looking scared and desperate. Jake had been recording his conversations with Leah for weeks on his phone because she'd been acting crazy and he wanted proof if she tried anything. He played us clips where Leah talked about making me pay for ruining her life and mentioned taking drugs from the hospital supply room for insurance. The lawyer said Jake would give all the recordings to the police if they dropped the drug charges, since someone obviously planted them. Detective Rodriguez got a warrant for Lena's apartment that same afternoon based on Jake's recordings, and what they found there made my skin crawl. The search team discovered stolen medications from the hospital in her bathroom cabinet, printed photos of our house taken from different angles like she'd been watching us, and a journal filled with pages and pages about revenge plans. The worst part was a whole section titled, "How to Make Someone Look Crazy," with my name written at the top and detailed notes about gaslighting techniques. 2 days later, David took time off work so we could meet with our therapist together to process everything the police had found. Looking through copies of Lena's journal pages, we saw she'd been planning this for months before she even started the infertility lies, with notes dating back to right after our wedding. The therapist helped us understand this wasn't just Leah reacting to me exposing her affair, but something she'd been plotting since the day I married David. I broke down crying when I realized she targeted me just for marrying her brother, not for anything I'd actually done wrong. David held me while I sobbed, both of us trying to understand how someone could be so calculated and cruel. That evening, Anna and Robert showed up at our door, without calling first, both looking like they hadn't slept in days. Robert explained they'd hired a criminal defense lawyer for Lena, but wanted to apologize to me for everything she'd put us through. Anna started crying and admitted she found Lena's old journals from college in their attic showing the same obsessive patterns about Jake back then. She said she'd noticed warning signs for years, but always made excuses, telling herself Leah was just passionate or misunderstood. Robert said they should have gotten Leah help years ago instead of enabling her behavior by always bailing her out of trouble. Meanwhile, Matt went to meet with Detective Rodriguez to give his own evidence about Lena, bringing bank statements and credit reports. He told the detective Leah had access to all his personal information during their relationship, and he'd recently discovered someone had opened credit cards in his name. The detective said if Leah had crossed state lines electronically while committing identity fraud, she could face federal charges on top of everything else. Why does Matt just now realize someone opened credit cards in his name when he's been helping them gather evidence for weeks? The timing feels awfully convenient that everyone suddenly has perfect evidence right when they need it for their case. Leah had been doing her own digging online and discovered Leah had created at least 12 fake social media accounts over the past year. She showed me screenshots where Leah had been using these accounts to follow my profiles, screenshot my posts, and even comment on my photos pretending to be different people. The most disturbing discovery was an account where Leah pretended to be a member of an online fertility support group one joined. She'd been in there for months gathering personal information from women sharing their struggles, using their stories to craft her targeted harassment about my supposed infertility. Leah had documented everything and turned it over to our lawyer as more evidence for the restraining order hearing. Jennifer Walsh, the lawyer we'd hired, called to tell us the restraining order hearing was scheduled for next week and we needed to prepare. She came to our house with a stack of papers and walked us through what would happen, warning us that Leah would probably show up and try to manipulate the situation. Jennifer said we needed all our witnesses ready to testify, including Matt and possibly Jake if he got released on bail before then. She helped us organize our evidence into categories, making sure we had copies of everything from the screenshots to the journal pages to the police reports. That night, I found David in his home office staring at old family photos from when he and Leah were kids. He had tears running down his face as he looked at pictures of them playing together at the beach at birthday parties at Christmas. He kept saying he should have seen this coming, wondering if something he did growing up made Leah turn out this way. I sat with him while he grieved for the sister he thought he knew, the one who used to protect him from bullies and help him with homework. 4 days before the hearing, Nina came over to help me create a timeline of everything that had happened. We spread papers across the dining room table, organizing every incident chronologically from the first mean comment at family dinner to the fake social media accounts. Looking at it all laid out, we realized Lena's planning had started months before I exposed her affair at the barbecue. The pattern showed she'd been building towards something big, and my revelation about her cheating just made her accelerate whatever she'd already been planning. Nina pointed out dates where Leah had created fake accounts that lined up with specific family events, like she'd been gathering ammunition at every gathering. We worked until midnight, organizing everything into a binder for the lawyer, both of us exhausted but determined to be ready. Then at exactly midnight, the doorbell rang, making us both jump since nobody visits that late. Through the peephole, I saw Leah standing there swaying on her feet, clearly drunk, mascara running down her face. David went to the door but didn't open it, telling her through the glass that she needed to leave because there was already an emergency protective order in place. She started sobbing and begging David to make me stop ruining her life, saying I'd taken everything from her. I grabbed my phone and started recording while David called 911, both of us staying inside with the door locked. Leah got louder, screaming that I'd stolen her brother, turned her parents against her, and destroyed the perfect life she was supposed to have. The neighbors started coming out of their houses to see what was happening, while Leah kept pounding on our door and screaming about how I'd ruined everything. Blue and red lights lit up our street within minutes as the police cars pulled up to our house. The officers got out and immediately approached Lena, who was still yelling at our front door. She turned to them and started crying about how we'd stolen her life and destroyed her family. One officer asked her to calm down while his partner walked up to our door where David explained about the protective order we filed last week. The officer's face changed when he heard that, and he walked back to tell his partner, who was still trying to calm Leah down. They asked her if she knew about the protective order, and she screamed that it was all lies and she had every right to talk to her brother. The officers told her she was under arrest for violating the order and for public intoxication since she was clearly drunk. As they put the "and" alone, the officers wrote down everything she said while our neighbors watched from their windows and driveways. They put her in the back of the police car, and one officer came back to get our statements while the other stayed with Lena. We showed him the video I'd recorded on my phone and gave him copies of all the threatening messages she'd been sending. He told us they'd be adding harassment charges to the violation and that she'd be held until her arraignment since she'd broken a protective order. After they left, we couldn't sleep at all and just sat on the couch holding each other. At 3 in the morning, my phone rang and it was the detective handling our case. He told us Lena's blood alcohol was 0.18 and she'd also tested positive for amphetamines that were probably stolen from the hospital where she worked. They were adding theft of substances to her charges and she'd be held without bail until the arraignment because of the protective order violation. He said the prosecutor was taking this very seriously now, with all the evidence piling up. The next morning, we sat at our kitchen table too tired to even make breakfast or eat anything. Our neighbor knocked on the door with a pot of coffee and some muffins saying she'd seen everything last night. She told us she'd installed security cameras after witnessing the arrest because she wanted to help if we needed any evidence. She also mentioned the neighborhood WhatsApp group was buzzing with concern about what happened and everyone was asking if we were okay. I realized then that our private nightmare had become public spectacle and everyone on our street now knew about our family drama. 3 days later, we met Jennifer at the courthouse for the restraining order hearing that should be straightforward now that Lena was in custody. Jennifer explained that Lena's defense attorney would probably argue she was having a mental health crisis and needed treatment instead of jail time. She warned us to be prepared for them to paint Lena as a victim of family betrayal who just snapped under pressure. The hearing started and Lena appeared on a video screen from jail looking like she hadn't slept in days with messy hair and red eyes. Her attorney argued she was experiencing a mental breakdown triggered by family betrayal and needed psychiatric help, not incarceration. The judge looked through all the evidence including the break and report the stolen medications from the hospital and the detailed revenge planning documents the police had found. He stated that Lena posed a clear and present danger to us and granted a 5-year restraining order with no contact allowed at all. Lena started crying on the screen saying we were destroying her life, but the judge cut the video feed and told us the order was effective immediately. The next week, Anna and Robert attended Lena's arraignment where she pleaded not guilty to burglary, harassment, theft of controlled substances, and identity theft. The prosecutor laid out all the evidence and asked for bail to be set at $50,000 given the severity of the charges and her violation of the protective order. Anna grabbed Robert's arm and whispered that they needed to post bail, but Robert shook his head firmly and said no loud enough for people to hear. It was the first time I'd ever seen them argue in public, with Anna insisting they couldn't abandon their daughter and Robert saying Lena had made her choices. The judge set bail at $50,000 and mentioned that federal charges might be added pending further investigation into the identity theft and prescription drug theft. After the hearing, David met his parents alone at a restaurant to talk about boundaries without me there. He told me later that he'd been very clear with them that he loved them but wouldn't tolerate any pressure to forgive Lena or drop the charges. Robert had supported him completely, saying Lena needed to face consequences for what she'd done to our family. Anna had struggled more, saying she couldn't just abandon her daughter even if Lena had done terrible things. David reminded her that Lena was facing consequences for her own choices, not anything they'd done wrong as parents. A week after that, I went back to work full-time, finding comfort in my normal routine and being around people who didn't know about the drama. My boss pulled me aside privately to tell me the company's legal team was ready to support me if Lena's actions had affected my employment in any way. My coworkers treated me normally, which I appreciated so much more than the sympathetic looks I'd been getting from neighbors and family friends. Then Matt filed a civil lawsuit against Lena for emotional distress and defamation after finding out she'd been telling people he was abusive to justify her affair with Jake. His lawyer subpoenaed both David and me as witnesses since we knew about the lies she'd been spreading about him. The civil case would run parallel to the criminal charges and could affect Lena's nursing license even if she somehow avoided jail time. Jake, who was out on bail for his own charges related to helping Lena, contacted the detective and said he had recordings of their phone conversations he wanted to turn over. In the recordings, Lena explicitly talked about stealing medications from the hospital and mentioned she'd plant evidence against me if necessary to break up my marriage. In one recording, she even said she'd had a key copy to our house months ago, just in case she needed to get in without us knowing. Talk about dedication to the craft. 12 fake accounts just to stalk someone online. That's more profiles than most people have streaming subscriptions and way less fun to manage when the bills come due. The detective said these recordings upgraded several of her charges to felony level and would likely add years to any potential sentence. 3 days later, I was at my doctor's office for what I thought was a routine checkup since I'd been feeling tired and stressed from everything going on. The nurse took my blood and urine samples like usual, and I sat in the exam room scrolling through my phone while waiting for the results. When the doctor came in with this weird smile on her face, she told me I was about 6 weeks pregnant. I just stared at her for a good 10 seconds before asking her to repeat that. She showed me the test results and explained that stress had probably made me miss the signs like my late period, which I'd blamed on everything with Lena. I walked out to my car in a complete daze and sat there in the parking lot for 20 minutes, just crying. Part of me was so happy because because David and I had wanted this for months, but another part was scared about bringing a baby into this mess with Lena's trial coming up. I kept thinking how she'd somehow ruin even this moment that should have been pure joy. That evening, I made David's favorite pasta and set the table with candles, which made him suspicious right away. When I put the pregnancy test next to his plate, he picked it up and looked at it 3 times before his eyes went wide. He didn't say anything for what felt like forever. Then he pulled me into this tight hug and whispered that we'd protect our family no matter what. We decided right there not to tell anyone yet since we didn't want Lena finding out somehow and using it against us or having it affect illegal stuff. 2 weeks passed and the prosecutor called with news about Lena's psychiatric evaluation. The court-appointed psychiatrist had diagnosed her with narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial features, but said she definitely understood her actions were wrong and illegal when she did them. This basically destroyed her lawyer's whole defense strategy about mental illness, making her not responsible for what she'd done. The prosecutor said this would probably add years to her sentence since he couldn't claim she didn't know what she was doing. I was at the pharmacy picking up prenatal vitamins when I turned the corner and ran straight into Anna. She looked at what was in my hand and her face just crumbled as she put 2 and 2 together. She started crying right there in the vitamin aisle, saying Lena had destroyed everything and begging me to remember the baby would be Lena's niece or nephew. I told her firmly that Lena would never be part of our child's life whether there was a restraining order or not. Anna tried to grab my arm, but I pulled away and left her standing there still crying. Lena came over the next day to help me research security systems since I'd been having nightmares about Lena showing up at our house. She found this company that specialized in helping stalking victims, and they came out that same afternoon to install everything. The technician put in cameras covering every angle of our property, motion sensors on all the windows and doors, and these panic buttons in every room that would directly call 911. He mentioned they'd been installing a lot more of these systems lately, which actually made me feel better, knowing I wasn't being paranoid. David came home early from work and found me in the spare bedroom organizing baby stuff I'd been secretly ordering online for weeks. Our couple's therapist had us come in for an emergency session after everything that happened, and we sat on her couch talking about how weird it was that Lena's actions had actually made our marriage stronger. David admitted he'd been a crappy husband before by always taking his family's side and never standing up for me, but now he was different. The therapist pointed out that our communication had gotten so much better through dealing with this crisis together. She said most couples fall apart under this kind of stress, but we'd grown closer, which said a lot. I was making breakfast when David's phone rang at 6 in the morning, which is never good news. Jake had been found unconscious in his apartment after taking a bunch of pills and leaving a note saying he couldn't live with what Lena made him do. The paramedics got there in time and pumped his stomach so he survived, but when the police questioned him at the hospital, he broke down completely. He told them Lena had been blackmailing him with intimate photos from when they dated, threatening to send them to his gym clients and ruin his fitness career if he didn't help her frame me. The detective called us later saying this added extortion and blackmail charges to everything else Lena was facing. The prosecutor met with David and me at her office to prep us for testifying at the trial. She explained that with Jake in the hospital, his recorded conversations with Lena were even more important as evidence now. She felt confident about getting a conviction, but warned us that Lena's lawyer would definitely try to make me look like the bad guy who started everything by exposing her affair at the barbecue. We spent 3 hours going over every detail of what happened and practicing how to answer the defense attorney's questions without getting emotional or angry. A month before the trial date, Robert showed up at our house with his toolbox to help David fix the garage door that had been sticking. While they worked, Robert mentioned that Anna had started seeing a therapist to deal with how she'd enabled Lena's behavior for so many years. He also told us that Lena's ex-boyfriend from college had contacted the prosecutor after seeing news coverage about the case and offered to testify about how she'd stalked him after their breakup, including slashing his tires and showing up at his job. The next morning, Jennifer called us into her office downtown and pulled out a thick folder from her briefcase. She slid papers across the desk, showing that the prosecutor had offered Lena a plea deal for 18 months in prison with mandatory psychiatric treatment, but she turned it down flat. Jennifer tapped a rejection form where Lena had written in big letters that she was innocent and the jury would see she was the real victim here. The trial date was set for next month, which meant we had 4 weeks to get all our testimony and evidence ready. I started spending hours every day going through documents and writing out my victim impact statement while David worked on his own testimony about how his sister had destroyed our trust. One afternoon, while I was sitting at the kitchen table reviewing the timeline of events for the 100th time, I felt something flutter in my stomach like a butterfly trapped inside. The baby was kicking for the first time, and I grabbed David's hand from across the table and pressed it against my belly so he could feel it too. We sat there for maybe 30 seconds, just feeling our baby move before the weight of everything crashed back down, and we had to return to preparing for court. I wrote page after page about how I'd lost my sense of safety and peace during what should have been the happiest time of my life. 3 days later, the Columbus Dispatch ran a story with the headline, "Local nurse charged with stalking sister-in-law after the court documents became public record." They didn't use our names, but anyone who knew us could figure it out pretty quick. My phone started buzzing with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, including my old marketing team, college friends, and even Mrs. Henderson who taught me sophomore English. Most of them sent supportive texts saying they couldn't believe what we'd been through and offering to help however they could. Matt had to give his deposition the following week, and Jennifer let us watch from another room through a video feed. He looked exhausted and kept rubbing his temples while he talked about how Lena's lies had destroyed his ability to trust anyone. He'd started seeing a therapist twice a week because he couldn't stop wondering if every woman he met was lying to him the way she had. His voice cracked when he described finding out about the affair at the barbecue and how it made him question everything about their relationship. The prosecutor asked him to describe the damage this had caused, and Matt said he had panic attacks now when a week before the trial was supposed to start. We all had to go to court because Lena's attorney filed a motion to dismiss the whole case. Her lawyer stood up and argued this was just a family dispute that had gotten blown out of proportion and should be handled in civil court, not criminal. The judge barely let him finish before cutting him off and saying the evidence showed clear criminal behavior, including theft of controlled substances from the hospital and breaking into our house. I watched Lena's face go white when the judge denied the motion, and she started whispering frantically to her lawyer, who just shook his head. 2 days after that, Anna texted me asking if we could meet for coffee at the Starbucks on High Street. I almost said no, but something in her message seemed different, so I agreed to go. She was already sitting in the corner when I got there with 2 cups of coffee waiting and dark circles under her eyes. She didn't ask for forgiveness or try to make excuses, but told me she'd cut off all financial support for Lena's defense after learning about the computer searches. Robert showing up to fix a garage door while casually dropping news about his wife's therapy and Lena's stalking history from college seems oddly timed. The plea deal rejection where Leah writes she's the victim makes me wonder what reality she's living in. She pulled out an envelope and showed me a letter she'd written to the court describing Lena's history of manipulation, going back to childhood and how she'd failed as a mother to address it. Anna said she didn't expect to have a relationship with a baby, but hoped maybe someday things could heal between us. I took the letter but didn't make any promises because I honestly didn't know if I could ever trust her again after everything. David had to meet with Jennifer 3 times that week to practice his testimony, and I could hear him from the other room struggling to get through it. He kept stopping when he got to the part about choosing to believe Leah over me for so long, and Jennifer had to remind him the jury needed to hear his honesty. During one session, he completely broke down sobbing about how he picked keeping the family peace over protecting his wife. Jennifer told him that showing genuine remorse and growth would help the jury understand how manipulative Leah really was. Meanwhile, Nina had been planning a small baby shower at her apartment with just our closest friends who'd stood by us through everything. She made everyone promise to keep it quiet and even hired an off-duty cop to check people at the door after everything that had happened. It was the first time in months that I actually felt happy and safe, surrounded by people who'd proven they really cared about us. While we were opening gifts, I looked around at these friends who'd become like family and realized we'd built something stronger than what we'd lost. The prosecutor called us the day before trial was supposed to start with new evidence they'd just gotten from Lena's work computer. The IT department had recovered her search history from weeks before she started spreading the infertility rumors and found she'd been researching how to cause miscarriages and what herbs could prevent pregnancy. She'd visited dozens of websites about natural abortion methods and even looked up whether certain medications could be slipped into someone's food without them knowing. The prosecutor said this changed everything because it showed she might have been planning to physically harm me, not just spread lies. The IT department had recovered her search history from weeks before she started spreading the infertility rumors and found she'd been researching how to cause miscarriages and what herbs could prevent pregnancy. She'd visited dozens of websites about natural abortion methods and even looked up whether certain medications could be slipped into someone's food without them knowing. The prosecutor said this changed everything because it showed she might have been planning to physically harm me, not just spread lies. The final pretrial hearing happened over video link because Jake was testifying from a psychiatric facility where he'd been staying since his breakdown. He looked thin and kept his eyes down while he described how Leah had promised him they'd be together forever if he helped her get rid of me. She'd shown him pictures of houses they could buy and talked about the kids they'd have once I was out of the picture. Then he dropped the biggest bombshell when he said Leah had talked about getting rid of me permanently if other methods didn't work. The prosecutor asked him to clarify and Jake said she never gave specifics but mentioned that accidents happen all the time and no one would suspect anything if I just disappeared. Everyone in the courtroom gasped and I saw the judge writing notes while shaking her head. 3 days before the trial was supposed to start, Jennifer called me with news about Leah's lawyer trying to work out a deal. He wanted her to plead guilty to lesser charges and get maybe 6 months in jail instead of facing everything. Jennifer told me she shut that down immediately, especially after hearing about Leah talking about making me disappear permanently. The lawyer actually quit right after that meeting because Leah screamed at him for even suggesting she take a deal. She demanded a public defender instead and got assigned some guy fresh out of law school who looked scared of her. The night before trial, I couldn't sleep at all and kept feeling the baby moving around like crazy. David found me sitting in the nursery we'd started setting up with a crib and changing table we bought last week. We just sat there together in the dark for a while until I finally told him I was scared to see her face in court tomorrow. He held my hand and said we'd get through it together for our baby's safety. Meanwhile, Robert and Anna had started going to therapy sessions to figure out how they'd let Leah get so bad. The therapist apparently helped them see the difference between helping your kid and letting them hurt other people. They decided they'd support the truth at trial instead of just taking Leah's side like they always did before. The morning everything started, I woke up to an email from Leah's new lawyer saying she'd leave town forever if we dropped the charges. The email also mentioned she knew things about me that I wouldn't want coming out, which made no sense since I had nothing to hide. Jennifer immediately added it to the evidence pile as more witness tampering and filed extra charges. We got to the courthouse early and the prosecutor laid out everything Leah had done in order from the mean comments all the way to breaking into our house. Her public defender tried to argue she had a mental breakdown because David chose me over family and needed help, not prison. When they called me to testify, I walked past Leah, who kept trying to stare me down, but I just looked straight ahead. I went through every single thing she'd done with dates and times and showed all the evidence we'd collected. When the prosecutor asked about how this affected me, I told them about the pregnancy and how I was terrified she'd hurt our baby. Leah's lawyer tried to make me look bad during cross-examination, saying I planned to destroy her by exposing the affair. I explained I kept quiet about her cheating for over a year until she started spreading lies that could have ended my marriage. The jury members were nodding when I talked about just wanting David's family to accept me like a normal person. David took the stand next and his voice cracked when he described finding our home broken into and our private stuff scattered everywhere. He looked right at Leah and told her he mourned the sister he thought she was, but couldn't enable who she'd become. During the lunch break, I went to the bathroom and Leah followed me in even though she wasn't supposed to come near me. Security guards rushed in when she started hissing that I destroyed everything and would pay for it eventually. The whole thing got caught on the courthouse cameras, which the prosecutor immediately showed to everyone when we came back. Leah's lawyer tried to explain it away, but everyone could see she couldn't stop harassing me even during her own trial. The prosecutor used that footage in closing arguments to show Leah would never stop coming after me no matter what. The jury went out around noon and we all just sat in the hallway waiting because nobody wanted to leave in case they came back fast. David held my hand while his parents sat across from us, not really talking to anyone. 3 hours later, the bailiff called us back in and my heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The jury foreman stood up and started reading guilty on the stalking charge and Leah's whole body went stiff in her chair. Then came guilty on the burglary and guilty on stealing drugs from the hospital and guilty on identity theft and guilty on trying to scare witnesses. With each guilty verdict, Leah kept shaking her head and mouthing no over and over while Anna started crying quietly and Robert just held her hand looking tired. 2 weeks later, we came back for sentencing and the judge let me read my victim impact statement about how I hadn't felt safe in my own home for months and how being pregnant should have been the happiest time, but instead I was always looking over my shoulder. Told the court I didn't want revenge, but I needed to know Leah would get real help and couldn't hurt anyone else the way she hurt me. The judge listened to everything, then said Leah showed no remorse at all and kept getting worse with each thing she did, so he was giving her 4 years in prison with required mental health treatment plus 5 years of probation after with no contact orders. Leah jumped up screaming that I ruined her life and destroyed everything before the guards grabbed her and dragged her out in handcuffs. Outside the courthouse, Matt came over to thank us for being brave enough to stand up to her and said he was moving to Texas for a fresh start and wished us luck with the baby. His lawyer also told us Jake was doing better in treatment and wanted to say sorry when he was ready mentally. A month later, we had Robert and Anna and Nina over for dinner to celebrate finishing the nursery and it was awkward at first, but Anna brought a baby blanket she made herself and said she didn't expect to be called grandma but hoped she could earn a place in our lives somehow. I started going to a support group for people who'd been stalked and it helped hearing other people say they felt guilty for pressing charges. Even though the counselor kept reminding us that holding people responsible wasn't being mean, it was keeping everyone safe. David and his dad spent a whole weekend turning our spare room into a home office so I could work from home after the baby came and I could see how much closer they've gotten through all this mess. Then I got a letter saying Leah's nursing license was gone forever because of stealing drugs and breaking patient privacy rules, and the hospital even changed their security rules because of what happened with us. The week before my due date, David and I went to a cabin for a quiet weekend with our phones off except for emergencies, and we walked through the woods feeling actually safe for the first time in over a year. David kept talking to my belly, telling the baby they'd grow up in a house built on truth and boundaries, not lies and manipulation. Then during a huge thunderstorm, my water broke and David coached me through contractions while Nina drove us to the hospital going way too fast, but nobody cared. When I finally held our daughter for the first time, everything Leah tried to destroy didn't matter anymore because we'd built something stronger than she could ever break. David kissed our baby's head and whispered she was safe now and we'd make sure of it, and I knew he was right because we fought through hell to protect this little family we'd made. Time flies when you're dropping truth bombs and setting boundaries. Appreciate you letting me snark alongside you on this wild ride. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.